this is the logic of the story. So you're conveying meaning constantly through the shapes of whatever is in the image. And this derives from the fact that narrative cinema is, in a way, a translation into a new medium of theater and of novel. That is, forms of art that are based on language and interpretation and meaning as such. So the visual element in cinema, which should be the essence of the media, is most of the time submitted to the literary content of what is happening, so that you can tell the story of the film. And if I tell you the story of the film I saw last night, for instance, it wouldn't be different from any, bad novel that I would have read, and it would give you no idea whatsoever of what the film looks like as a visual thing. So the point here is to say cinema should be on its own. It's a little like the pure cinema claims of early century. Cinema should be an art of its own, on its own, and with its own object. And its object is not the things that we name and interpret. The object is moving shapes. This is the real, we say, specific object of cinema, and the only one that should be explored as such. So if movement is language, which is what they say at the end, it's not language as the language we know. It is an original, hidden language covered with our language. It's the language of things in their changing, evolution, metamorphosis. Is the language of development, of growth, of life and death, of real becoming of the world. So I go on. I won't go to the end. Well, it's too bad because it's all very, very enlightening, I think. But anyway. Movement is the unpremeditated being. It is the uncritical expression of life. As we begin to meditate, we begin to stop living. It is necessary to stop living at some point because life is livable only within individual limits. It is necessary to meditate because if we fail to recognize the significant limits, we become involved in conflicts with other things, and one thing destroys the other, and everything becomes nothing. But the recognition of limits comes only when we stop to meditate about meanings. First comes life, and if we meditate prematurely, if we lend to physical things a critical self-consciousness, we are substituting imagination for movement and sentimentalizing the physical past. Up to a certain point, we must leave physical things alone and let them speak for themselves in movement. We must understand the physical physically. We cannot expect physical things to articulate meaning because they do not care what they mean. They care only about being. Indeed, in themselves, they have no meaning beyond their distinct, exclusive will to be. So, without commenting all the details here, just want to stress the fact that this is about spontaneous movement, spontaneous life, in the kind of neo-primitive idea that you can and should go back to what happens with no thought, with no stop, no meditation, no calculation, and that what happens thus, the movement of life, is also, this is very important, the proof, the witness and the proof that there is a universal will to be. The last words, will to be, is very important because it means that there is, exactly as I said, I commented in Blake, there is a positive energy of life. you're not fascinated and attracted to the movement of natural things as Lemlai is, if you believe that the world works like a Swiss clock, that things are moving out of a mechanical, physical structure that repeats itself, and that you can analyze and reverse with I don't know, physics, for instance, or technology. If you're so attracted by movement and the growing and transformation of things, it's because you believe that there's a life principle, that there is a life source and energy at work everywhere. So it's this kind of belief. It could be a Nietzschean belief in the will to power, or it could be a vitalistic belief, as in Bergson, in élan vital, that is coming to all things, even the inert things that want to become alive, so to speak. But there is or a Neoplatonistic idea that all things, even physical, inert things, have an inner soul, that there is a universal soul of the world and an individual soul of each little thing. But there is necessarily this kind of belief in the enthusiastic embracing of movement that you find with such artists, especially in the early century, with rediscovering primitive arts and discovering the spontaneous beauty of dance, Isadora Duncan, or of sports and gym, and and even nudist camps. I mean, the early century was, among other things, a period where there was a kind of rediscovery of nature, not only as landscape, but as inner nature and spontaneity and strength, primitive strength. It can also be a cliche, and of course, and it's very wrong as a stereotype to find fresh and natural impulse and life with so-called primitive people. But in Lai's case, it's not condescending. It's not exotic, because he believed he was himself a savage. And he perceived himself and presented himself as a primitive. So it's not only that he's charmed and attracted by this idea of natural energy. Both, I think, in his mind, it's both artistic energy of imagination and creation, but it's also energy of desire, pulsion, sexual energy. It really goes to all the aspects of life. Being centered on movement is trying to capture the source of life's energy, really, in all its forms. Let's just go to maybe the last paragraph where they state, because there's a long critique of narrative films, showing that narrative film, you can read it at lunch break if you didn't have time to, but it's basically trying to show that in narrative film, it's not the visual reality of things that is really at play, but rather the interpretation of the meaning of every character, thing, and movement, and therefore that the real physical beauty of movement is not used and not shown as such, and is rather impaired and covered by the discourse of literary interpretation, psychological interpretation of the story, etc. And it's quite funny, actually, how they mock historical films, and they mock it as hysterical. It's not a pun they make, but hysterical because it's a fake animation that is not the real animation of the thing itself, but something that is fused into them by discourse and interpretation of the motives, etc. So just this sentence here, the language of the cinema at the end of the page, first page, the language of the cinema is movement. When it attempts to make of movement a literary language, the result is a physical, intellectual, caricature language, which furnishes stories of life as something half true, half ridiculous. And this, interestingly enough, has always been the target of avant-garde criticism of mainstream cinema from early on, the historical film. Historical films has always been a good example for people who hate narrative cinema, of how ridiculous narrative cinema can be. So one of the first historical films ever made was the assassination of the Duc de Guise, the important historical event for France, not for anyone else. But the Duc de Guise, he was a very glamorous and lovable character, and he was brutally assassinated by the king, who was jealous. So they first made a historical film of maybe 2 minutes with the assassination of the Duc de Guise, and since the early cinema, they took from theater, from popular theater, all their codes and clothes, etc. It is really completely ridiculous. I mean, you don't believe it for a second. It's ridiculous clothes, and it's theatrical, exaggerated attitude, and nothing happens but something that you already know will happen. So it's and they made fun of this film at the time with Germain Dulac and Epstein, the pure cinema advocates. And now again, it's not by chance that the films they quote to make fun of them are historical reconstitution, like Henry VIII, which in my opinion is a great film. With Charles Laughton. And Catherine the Great, probably with Marlena, maybe? Imperatrice Rouge, the Red Empress, Stenberg, I don't know. And Christina of Sweden is probably a film with Garbo, Queen Christina. The language of the film, that is, becomes the language of hysteria. People have been trained to go to the cinema to enjoy respectable hysteria, not to know physically and soberly life. So hysteria is like a simulation of life. And so they enjoy films more than proper stage drama, because the excitement of feeling unreasonably and irresponsibly in contact with meanings is on a larger scale than with stage drama. The contacts are limited to a few curious situations in which life is erratically aglow with meaning, while films are constructed to give the illusion that any ordinary life situation is potentially eloquent of meaning. Then they go to state the principle of the new cinema they advocate. That's the last thing I'd like to look at with you. These 6 or 7 principles, 6 statements. 1. Form in movement compositions is the total effect of accidental design created by cross movements, perspective movements, timing, accenting, all the variations of action, whether in natural juxtaposition or not. So basically, all the elements are here to create the form in film. 2. There is a possibility of isolating a movement consciousness, by reverting to such reflex spontaneities as hereditary instincts are composed of. It might even be said, perhaps, that this gift of physical immediacy, which is the gift of a consciousness of movement, is discoverable through the brain in blood, organs, tissues, nerves, that a physical time sense can be physiologically cultivated. This is a strange and important point. That is, to make such films that they want to make, or that he wants to make, and not, is in a way to become another body yourself, to become something like a dancer, that is to experience your own capability of creating such movement, of controlling movement, of doing the right gestures, the right or the beautiful, or whatever gestures, true gestures you're looking for, and that is being attentive to your own inner rhythms, changes, movements, to your own possibilities in terms of muscular and sensory organs, movement and changes. And concretely, it is true that lie, in a way also Brakhage and Schalitz, you could say the same, became physically different than they were by making the films they made, because it was a physical challenge to, or like a painter like Jackson Pollock. You can see Jackson Pollock painting in this famous film. He's obviously painting with the whole of his body, and it's not any body. It's a very peculiar body that he cultivated to do that. And it's the same with Lai. When he's doing painting on the films, he developed a graphic skill that is really incredible, but that is completely unique and particular to this type of practice, and that you wouldn't find anywhere else. And he thought of himself as really experiencing, that's the most interesting part of his aesthetics, I think, experiencing realms of change and movement that are usually unconscious, inner changes and movements, rhythms of the organs and brain and the visual cortex, etc., that you're usually completely unaware of. And he believed, and if he believed it, it was true that he experienced it, that he was doing art in his own body, or that art was changing and reshaping his own body. And concretely, it's true that he was doing things like a dancer, manipulating sometimes very heavy things for his sculptures, imagining movements that he would then give to the object he painted, or the creatures he would animate like in cartoons. This was all one experience of very diverse possibilities of movement, but it was all united in his body, because movement is not an abstract intellectual thing. It's something that you have to do, experience as gestures, as acts, actions. That's what he means by cultivating physiologically a certain sense of time and movement. Consciousness of movement may be purely receptive as a passive sensing of the vibration pattern, so that we might speak of a sense of movement just as we speak of a sense of telepathy. It's purely perceptive, meaning a receptive intuition of other people's thoughts, or a theosophistic sense, meaning a receptive intuition of things unknown. Here we are again very close to the prophetic, spiritual speculation, or theosophical. Or we might say, speaking in terms of light, color, sound, atoms, that nothing physical exists in a static state. This is another form of the thesis he stated first. But at the same time, we should have to say that by movement, we meant not external or mechanical movement, but movement as our own physical existence projected outside the mind and seen as living. So here we have another form of this very interesting shift that I try to show in Brakhage aesthetic, for instance, between the objective observation of what vision is to the inner forms of vision that are so undiscernible with imagination that you cannot know whether you see things or you make things up, or you create image in your mind. And here Lai suggests that he's not so much interested in the physical outside movement of physical things as with the echo of this movement in internal phenomena. That is proprioceptive, you know that thing, proprioceptive perception, the way you perceive your own muscular tension, or introspective, endoscopic, perception, that is, as if you could watch inside your own body what is happening, what is changing. So it's really towards that he's leading. His art does not show, the way natural things move in natural world, because you don't need to invent new forms for that. You just need to record them. His art is trying to show certain kinds of movements that are analogous, close, and maybe revealing of the inner moving and ever-changing life that we vaguely suspect or sense, but that we are not fully aware of. What he calls
theosophistic sense.
Where is that?
That's in the three.
Oh yes, that's right. I was looking too far. Receptive intention. Yes, a receptive intuition of things unknown. A sense of movement, but then, yes, movement as our, in the fourth paragraph, movement as our own physical existence projected outside the mind and seen living. So that the visible forms of his art, that we will see an example of in the film, would be like the projected vision of inner movement. Exactly as in Brakhage, at one point, he discovers that the eye film has to be a brain film, and that imagination is as important as pure perception. There is something that I didn't mention yesterday, but I'm sure you were aware of it when you watched the beginning of Dark Star Man, is that if you think that such a film is showing the visual content of someone's mind, that is, if you think that the images are representing or reproducing as precisely as possible the images that Brakhage mind, for instance, can create when he's daydreaming or closing his eyes, it's very obvious to me that there cannot ever suppose that the vague imagery that you can conjure when you're closing your eyes or daydreaming will never be remotely as complex and precise as the imagery of the film. So that it doesn't make real sense when you watch it to imagine that this could represent what is actually created in someone's mind. No one dreams. It is well known that dreams are extremely vague visually, and if you try to be precise, you add things. In themselves, they're usually extremely vague and colorless, and poor. But any inner imagery is in any way it must be always much poorer and much simpler than such a refined editing of such precise superimposed image, so that it doesn't really make sense to think that he's trying, or maybe he's trying, but he's doing something completely different than what he thinks he's doing then. That he's trying to reproduce some imagery that really happens in someone's mind. You see what I mean? The film is, 10, 100 times more complex and precise than any imaginary vision can be, right? So that then if you realize that, you stop thinking, these kind of ideological self-justifications, like I'm doing this kind of film because I'm trying to show what's happening in your mind. It's not. It doesn't really make sense. What does is that it shows what imagination, active imagination, can do when it's actually working with physical images, such as Brackage is doing. So his imagination here is at play and very powerful. But it's imagination and creation. It's not something that naturally happens in your mind. Because what naturally happens in your mind, what is it? Vaguely, well, I don't know, maybe your mind is better, but in terms of imagery, it's extremely simple and poor compared to any of these films. So I thought of that because Lai, he also states something similar to this play, saying that his films will actually externalize inner phenomena. But the truth is that if they externalize it, they probably prove it so much and make it so much more than what it was originally, then it's not as a witness of inner life that they are interested, but rather as creative, imaginary constructions, which you will judge for yourself. Okay, maybe we should start. Just going to the last two general statement. Fifth, 5, and we may now say that in rendering movement, we are replacing static memory with time. Movement as a technical medium is indeed time. Well, that's an old philosophical debate,
Yes.
but we won't go through Aristotle, etc. But anyway, the association of time and movement is quite inevitable, and one is counting the other, so that you cannot have one without using the other as a measure, at least, or as a rule. You measure time by movement, and you measure movement also by time. So a time-based media like film is, or music, or poetry for that matter, but in the visuals realm as cinema, is naturally the medium for movement. People are, where was I? Time. Exactly rendered movement supplies a pure record of time emphasis. It holds a mind temporarily in an absolute consciousness of life, and nothing else but life. Meanings do not for the time being exist, and so no false meanings. The only other pure consciousness state is when thought holds the mind statically in an absolute consciousness of death, and only truth exists, and so no false life memory. So there's an extreme opposition, right? If you look at movement, then there is no meaning, no truth, it's pure life. So if we take that seriously, we should watch his film shutting out and silencing any search for meaning. No
Just
meaning
watch
at all. Just watch it. Yeah. Don't look for any interpretation. Don't interpret, as Derrida says. Never interpret. Which is, nice guy. It's easier to say. Never interpret. And the second thing is that, as opposed to that pure, if it exists, experience of movement with no meaning, life with no meaning, the real pure truth and the parousia of meaning would have to be on a fixed thing and on definitively fixed contemplation, and that is death. So, obviously, lies rather on the side of movement than the side of knowing and meaning, since for him, the desire for meaning and meaningfulness conduct to fix and stop and fix meanings and kill, actually, everything that is alive and changing. Last, film is technically the best method for the isolation of visual movement. That is plain enough. As sound and visual movement are equal in timing, they can be balanced with accents and silences in film. This is the whole music of the cinema that you will see. And that plays also on the soundtrack relationship with image. But it is necessary to point out that no sound has yet been composed as sound movement, not on the level on which we are talking of visual movement here. This is a bit mysterious. I don't know exactly what it means. Sound should be composed as sound movement. Perhaps a way of composing music that would stress the changing and the constant evolution of sound rather than a single, pitch and single note as such. I don't know if that's what he means. There has been a movement in music in the late 70s called spectral music, where instead of having, discrete notes forming melodies or forming chords and harmony, we would have one sound that would expand and be explored in all the spectrum of wavelength and timbre, and sound colors. And so, in this sense, it would be, or even not spectral music, but like an antecedent of spectral music like Giacinto Scelsi. I don't know if you know this Italian composer of the afterwork. Giacinto Scelsi, I don't know if that's what I would be thinking of, because he didn't know that at the time, but I'm trying to imagine what kind of music he would be thinking of. In Giacinto Scelsi's music, usually the whole piece of each piece, the whole piece revolves around one note, one pitch. And this pitch is issued continually by a whole range of instruments in the classical orchestra, but all these instruments try to play on the limits, upper and down limits of the sound, and on variation in color of sound, so that a single height, a single pitch, becomes actually a surface and even a volume with all the interfering or slightly different, so that what you hear really when you hear it is like a note that is at the same time the same note and constantly out of tune, variating like that, and it's in constant change, it never stops. So maybe he's thinking of some kind of music like that would emphasize the transformation, constant transformation, rather than the discrete elements that would be like fixed images, put together in a film. I'm not sure. So I will first show you a scenic plan that is mostly text, hardly any image, except this image here that you see is not very precise. But I will need the light just to read you what the text says, or at least parts of what the text says. Because you will see that the text is not continuous. No, that's not the term. It's not linear. It is continuous, but it's not linear. It's like a clock. It's like a Swiss clock. More or less. Yeah. It's like a clock, so that it's like one single sentence with changing elements in the sentence that are like turning in cycles, as the shorter or larger wheels of a clock. And so it's the same sentence ever continuing with different elements. So the way I will read the translation of the elements is not at all the way you will see it on the screen, but to give you an idea of what the sentence says, and it goes much too fast to read all sentences anyway, so you can pick up one from time to time and try to remember it, because that's the point. It's called Do Not Forget It. So this is the whole text, although it continually runs and comes back in the film. Do not forget it. One day still, perhaps today, certainly a moment ago, no doubt within last year, one night, recently, believe me, once in your life, one Monday in June, at least in your childhood, from time to time, instantly, at each hour, every day, in the darkness, through the window, on the ceiling, eyes closed in the street, on the phone in transportations, on TV at the office, in the papers in bed, in a movie at the hospital, in a book at the sea, on the floor, in face, in altitude, in the toilet, in dreams. You've seen, you've felt, you've perceived, you've noticed, you've met, you've made out, you've embraced, you've reached, you've admired, you've loved, you've thanked, you've guessed, you've suspected, you've discovered, you've betrayed, you've rejected, you've refused, you've ignored, you've sacrificed, you've missed, unknowingly, unwillingly, in passing by reflex, with no merit by chance, through negligence, unaware, unexpectedly in a moment of weakness, perversely in hiding, indirectly, as a challenge for nothing, shamelessly for love, as a joke, for pleasure, for the gesture. A thing, a detail, an object, a partner, an animal, a plant, a material, a creature, a monster, an idea, an image, a ghost, a signal, a memory, an emotion, a thought, a sentence, an urge, a beauty, quick, sleek, supple, simple, dense, shy, and tiny, sublime, strange, incredible, fantastic, useful, difficult, complex, dark, implacable, sullied, unique, necessary, which awoke you, excited you, convinced you, converted you, which surprised you, delighted you, which troubled you, worried you, shook you, which overwhelmed you, mystified you, misguided you, which dazed you, saved you, cured you, reconciled you, enthused you, which helped you, supported you, animated you, deeply, perfectly, terribly intensely, absolutely softly again, madly, for once almost too much, as never to the end, with no limits, magically, irresistibly, forever, excessively, totally. Do not forget it. So now it's
feelings of it.
for the translations, a few small translations I have two more small singing poems that I can show you, shorter actually. One was the first one I did, which I mentioned earlier, and made me go faster than I expected. It's, well, you'll see if you listen. No need to explain. I will just read the text such as it is, and then you'll see how it works. There are three voices, or three levels on the film. And the title of the film is, or the text is Elvin Jones. I don't know you were who Elvin Jones is. He's a drummer, very famous, brilliant drummer. So the first voice goes. You smash cobbles, you break statues, you deal new cards, you launch the bases to the top, you shake branches, you lift skirts, you crack pods, you slice logs, you scratch debris, you plow out, you plow ice, plow? You plow ice, you dig canals, you feather birds, you blow dust, you divide atoms, you make tombstones waltz, you unbury, you reanimate. And the second voice goes, I make you come down, I undress you, I unlock you, I analyze you, I profane you, I dismantle you, I banalize you, I'll make you bend, I put you in a black box, I forge a fellowing cage for you, I'll multiply you, I'll digitalize you, I free access you. And the third voice comes and says, but you hack instruments, you add oil to water, you overdrive gears, you change calendars, you make the night come, you're a step ahead, you destroy allies, you preventively strike, you lubricate the rope, you divert, you err, you err, you erase your traces, you disinform, you violate your rules, you burn your vessels, you dilapidate, you discredit yourself, you kill yourself, you reconstitute yourself. if I find it. But it should be far from the other one. Oh, here it is. That's a miracle. Thank you.
Did you say something in Balck in 2007? I think.
It could be.
You know
I
what,
don't remember.
what you showed? But I saw it in
It could be, yeah.
was it one of these?
That was what, 3 years ago? It was in an exhibition, part of an exhibition. I did several things at Balck the last years, quite a few. So I'm not sure. Some at one point they were showing in loop some of the films in the Balck, permanent exhibition, I guess. Maybe that's that. I also did readings and performances there. But I don't remember which. Yeah, that's about all I can please show you with the translations. This is extremely short one, maybe a 30-second one. I don't know if it's worth looking for it, but I have the text here. So sorry.
I just wanted to ask, did you write these initially with the intention of presenting them like this?
So this very short one, maybe to finish the presentation, is called the Dusk Rabbits, and it's extremely simple. And the text says, dusk rabbits, grey on the meadows black, a rain of tennis balls. Some good hopes come out as well, and they dodge you. You see their tiny dirty pale bottoms at sundown. So I just see it going like that in the dark if I find it. Because I have no menu, so there are only 10 of that. So these are much longer films with found footage and voiceover. So it's really not easy to. Oh, here it is. Oh wait, I didn't put the. Yeah, I know, but I didn't put the sound back. Sorry. Okay.
Was that last one ever put in a loop, or do you like I guess what I'm saying is, do you like that length, or are you against putting it in a loop to make it longer?
No, in that case, I'd rather have it very short like that because
I think it works.
It's
really
supposed to be very light. Yeah. On loop, well, it's a matter of the context. When it's in a visual plastic art exhibition, it makes sense to put it on loop because people just circulate, and so they can watch it once. It doesn't mean that they watch it over. So in a movie theater, of course, it's not.
And the other thing is you can put a 5-minute pause in the loop, so or whatever, so that it remains the same length as well.
Yes, Sure, I guess, yes. It depends. Some were shown like in long feature, but not more than 40 minutes because it's too dense. So you just see everyone after the other in some cases, in some festivals, in some things like that. But I believe sometimes it's part of a live performance, but something else. But only some of these films are allow that or call for that, really. Not the short ones, like the longer pieces where you can change a little bit, the tempo, and even sometimes improvise a little. And in most cases, I think now they're shown in exhibitions. So then, the person asks for one film, two films, and then they put it on. For instance, the one with the song, it's one of the first ones I made. It has been taken in one or two exhibitions recently where it was, just this single thing on a monitor, for instance. But for me, it's always better if you can project it. If you can project it.
Oh.
So what are the ideal, places, circumstances, contexts where you would like these to be screened?
When I was working on the DVD for this one, I thought the DVD was fine because you could use it as a book, more or less. You could come back, go to one chapter without the others, and it made sense. And also the fact that you can stop is a good thing for some of the poems. Because, for instance, I thought I don't know if anyone ever used it like that, but I did it once recently to make the poster of an exhibition that is next fall. You could take from the first one with the turning, memories. You could use it a little like the Yiking, and press random and read the sentence, because many of these things are subliminal. You don't catch them.
I mean, I think it's almost better that way, because I have a friend who does experimental typography, and she says that it's not so much about being able to read the words at this point, it's about being able to present them in such a way that they convey maybe better than the words themselves what the words are meant to convey. So that
I see the point. I see the point. Yeah. Certainly they're not meant to be, sentences on their own, each of them. It's rather the movement. But still, the fact that you have a certain initiative possible with the DVD form seemed to be a good thing. That you could stop, go back, etc. I like the idea. But DVDs are doomed. So now some of them are on YouTube. Not anymore, frankly, I don't know.
No,
But they were at one point.
Tante Elizabeth.
Why not? What?
Tante Elizabeth.
Tante Elizabeth is on YouTube?
Yes.
I didn't know.
Not YouTube, so you can actually download it.
I see. Oh, yes. Who are these people? No, that's perfectly all right.
Yeah,
The only
some
problem
are.
with that is that very often they're very poor copies and pixels like that. Otherwise, I don't know. So to answer your question, I don't have a real answer. This is a problem. You're right. I don't know what are the ideal conditions, if there are any, because I started these as part of performance things. Then we edited them, and at one point they stabilize. Once you've done it, 5, 6 times, you know more or less what's the best thing. So you record it, you mix it, you edit it, but then it's not a feature film. It's too short to organize a projection for it. So mostly it's like experimental film. They're in festivals, they're in retrospective things, or
Are these accepted into experimental film festivals?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Actually, yes, they have been programmed several times in festivals. Oh,
I have another one.
Okay.
Nobody
Shoot.
else does. Can you talk more about the relationship to the music? Like at what point in the production the music comes in? Or?
Yes. Generally speaking, the music comes last. not always, but in most cases, especially with the one with the Elvin Jones one. I was glad when the music was made and mixed with the film that most viewers thought that the film was made from the music, but it's absolutely not the case, and it's not even synchronized. If you carefully watch, you have an impression of synchronicity. It's just an impression because the rhythm of the three lines is not how do you say that? One rhythm has no proportion with the other, so that it could go on and on for years and you wouldn't find the same combinations. So the music sometimes it seems to be synchronized with one line, sometimes with the other. It's an illusion of harmony, but there is no harmony, and that's what I wanted because the idea was really concurring rhythms that cannot unite, cannot make a whole. And Elvin Jones, for me, was a symbol for that because he was such a brilliant drummer. He died just last year, I think. He was such a brilliant drummer that he could follow 2 or 3 different rhythms at the same time, dissociated, with no contamination. That's pretty impressive.
I didn't notice in the credits if it was there, but did you do the music? Or somebody else?
No. I didn't do music. I commissioned the music to this musician who is a very close friend of mine with whom I worked forever almost. So I know exactly what he can do. And he knows.
So you leave it up to him basically? And
yes, in that case I leave it up to him. Mm-hmm. And he's the same musician who did the song for Tante Isabelle. Not on the other film though. The other film is a Japanese deep house musician, as they call it. Well, the deep house still exists.
So the woman who was singing in the Elizabeth, did you commission her to sing?
Not me, but the musician who made. There's a record. They made a whole record out of these local traditional songs, and they invited her, and they did something odd but interesting, which is that they recorded her a cappella, and then wrote and did the music on top, so that there is no fixed tempo, and even the tune is not very stable. You can sense it in the music is a little like, and also the percussion sounds are water sounds. Like when you do that on a wet dance, and so the whole thing is a bit approximative.
Did you say it's a collaboration or a commission for the musician?
Oh, no, it's not a commission for the musician. Although I think originally they had a kind of grant or something to spend time in this area and to record all kinds of things, like almost like ethnology, ethnomusicology. It started like that, as a project of simply recording what people had to say or the traditions, etc. And from that, the project of a record and a musical piece emerged more immediately. So it started with a commission, but then it was more collaborative. But for the anecdote, what's funny with the case of this singer, Madame Rosa, she's called, is that she used to sing in all the local feasts, but never outside of the valley. And when the record came out, there was a little bit of media excitement around it, especially in the region. And they were presenting it in Strasbourg, which is about 50 miles away from the place. And so they invited her to come to the presentation, and they had a hard time convincing her to come. And at the last moment she didn't come, and they learned that her husband forbid her to leave the valley because he was afraid she would become a star and would leave the house and never come back. So she stayed within the little valley.
Is it the same for the sound musician who you've been working with for everything?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Because the singer is something and the musician who did those
yes, the same musician.
Are they the same? The singer is different, right?
No, the singer is this woman that you see
Yeah.
at the beginning
But
of the
the
film.
musician is a different.
Oh yes, and she didn't hear the music while she was singing. The music was made afterwards in the studio and adapting to her voice, to her rhythm.
No, I was just wondering how one draws the line between collaboration and commission when
Mhm.
when they're given carte blanche to work on a
Mhm.
piece.
Yes.
Would this be a commission or a collaboration?
In that case, it's not a commission because no one commissioned the music itself. Right? There was no institution or whatever. They took their own initiative.
That particular piece, the found footage piece, reminded me of some of Lynn Laia's work. I mean, in terms of the music, the constant like flow of the music, and then also each time that it would change to a different found footage piece, it was really similar to how Lynn Lai cut from one design into another design, but constant movement, and so I thought that was interesting. I mean, that was just something I thought of right now.
No, but it was a great compliment. I hadn't thought of when I doing it, but I love it. The only thing that I consciously borrowed here is the color flicker. This, behind the black and white.
Chercher.
Yeah, or other flicker films, because they're more or less, one frame or 2 frames each.
In total, Elizabeth, you've mixed the like images, visual, photos, moving images with the title, with the text.
Yes.
And for some reason, it felt like the other ones were much more powerful.
The ones without images, you mean?
Yeah, or without the combination.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if you felt that you needed to put the text afterwards, or was it from the start?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand.
The subtitle.
The subtitle.
Yeah.
For you, what is less powerful is that you have the 3 elements of music, image, and subtitles,
Yeah.
right? Rather than without the subtitles, or rather than without the image?
No, I mean either or.
Uh-huh.
I
Well,
was
there's
just
always
wondering the subtitle if it came afterwards, or was it
Mhm.
from the beginning of the making? It was
No,
supposed to be
well,
there.
I'm not sure I remember well. This is really the first editing work I ever done on this one. It was long and painful, but I had help. I had help from someone, fortunately technical help. But I don't remember exactly why and when we put the subtitles. The text is unintelligible for a French speaker. Nobody can understand what she's saying. So probably from the start we thought that.
You wanted to explain the text.
And also because what the rhythm tells you that it's the same with longer each time, like adding an element each time, right? You can guess that from the sound. But the fact that it's a kind of small cosmology, going from the bottom to the top, I think is important to, or relevant for the kind of images that were chosen, and even for the interest of the song as such. So I don't think I could have done without it. Also because there's this kind of pseudo illustration each time, but it's like far-fetched illustration. Right? Like you have a bird, and then you see a woman that looks a little like a bird, or colors. You have colors, but it's not really to the point. But having this loose relationship, I think I wanted. But I'm sure you're right in terms of efficiency, and that's always the difficulty with all this kind of thing that I try to do, is that the more levels of information you have, the more difficult it is to get through something, right? And it's very easy to get some overload, because reading is tiresome, You can't read and watch an image at the same time. Listening to music, if it's not strictly illustrative, and watching an image and reading a text or hearing a voice at the same time can be really too much, so that it means that you will sacrifice one or two of them. And very often I'm very disappointed because people tell me, oh, I love this piece, the image and the elephants, etc., but whatever was the text, I didn't because, you know, you get fascinated. Often, I must say, the image is stronger. When the image is strong, there's nothing you can do to distract the attention. So it's very delicate to dose, to have the right dosage. So very often I have to weaken the image, slow it down, and, you know, takes just a little of it, because it's so strong, and then you become deaf and the text doesn't get through. And also the text is long and a little dense. You know, it's an effort to sustain your attention, and you don't want to have too much interference around it. Quite the opposite. I was trying to do something both sentimental and nice about this, so that
and there were, I mean, some of the images.
I took most of the images. I was lucky because I had never thought of question of copyright. So I took the images and I didn't ask anyone. And then I realized that the place where I was editing, they were just, you know, giving me the place for free during the nighttime. So I was editing in the middle of the night in this place. But I didn't know exactly what kind of place it was. It was post-production. Then I discovered that it belonged to a man very well known now in France, but he wasn't at the time, who is a collector of early silent films, most of all kinds of films, but mostly of early silent films. And in his collection, he has many of the films that I used here that are hand-painted. You know, the whole, many of them are hand-painted, even the sky at the end, they're hand-painted films. And I took it from, you know, any kind of a vulgar edition or even video cassettes, I didn't care. But then I realized that he owned the rights to many of his films, and I asked him officially if he would give me the permission. And so I mentioned this story to say that most of the films, except some, except maybe the Bollywood scene at the end and one or two others, most of them are films from the early 1910s. So basically, I thought this would be around the years when Madame Rosa was born. She's in her 80s, was at the time. And I looked, you know, in there because I knew that I would find material that really touched me. Like these dancing men in a film like Edison, such a strange film. Had you ever seen that before? Two men dancing together in front of the phonograph? That's an Edison film. To demonstrate the marvel of this new phonograph. And so, yeah, I didn't, there was no conscious irony. Really.
And I mean, a lot
comedy,
of the things
yes,
in themselves were definitely magical, but like the bed also, the
Yeah.
dancing bed. But yeah, I thought placing them all together in, you know,
Yeah.
that to me
Yeah,
was
well,
kind
I don't know. I thought of that, I guess, as a kind of burlesque editing more than.
Copyright wouldn't be an issue with those anymore.
Maybe not, because they're so. Yeah, maybe not.
75 years.
Yeah, probably would. Yeah.
Unless someone renewed it, though.
Sorry?
Yeah,
Unless somebody renewed it.
often it's
Disney renewed
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse to 75 years. But
I don't care for Mickey Mouse.
No.
No, I like the early Mickey Mouse. The early ones, like the works.
Steamboat.
Yeah, black and white. Anyway, so what time is it? It's much early. 6:30. So you have to ask me questions for another half hour. Sorry,
What are you
but
working on now?
that's a deal. No. I haven't been working on film very much recently. It's only because I was invited to come back to the stage, so to speak, for these things like the Festival d'Avignon, that I started really working on re-editing some of the films and a little bit of doing some new, getting new material. But actually for the last six years, I've been working mostly on narrative, with no image, no cinema, nothing of the kind. Except when there's an opportunity to do, or a proposal to do a live thing, where I can mix reading, simple reading, which I'd rather not do now, with kind of interactive video musical concept. But I did, it's not entirely true, because the second DVD is quite recent actually, it's 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago I think, that I commenced at Seoul. I enjoyed doing it very much, and it was a different situation since I was collaborating with a visual artist. And since then, from time to time, to tell you the truth, it's when I can't write that I like to do a film editing. Because when I can't write, if I do a film, this I'm sure you'll find very trivial, but it's the truth. When I do a film, let's say a 3-minute or 4-minute film like that, and I have to write the text for it, if I have a real writer's block, writing like 15 lines of text and knowing that it will take me maybe 2 or 3 months to edit the film, it's a reasonable risk. I can do it. Like it's 1 word every 2 days. So the length of the editing, and very often it's almost frame by frame. Like, for instance, this turning thing, it looks fluid and simple, but it is terrible pyramid of infinite mess. So the length then allows me to write much more slowly, which is better than not writing.
I was going to ask if you'd read some of your poetry.
Now? I could, but I don't have anything with me. If you have something.
Don't you have some on the internet?
No, it's English, so.
On the internet? I doubt it. Oh yes, I have, but I don't have translations. I only have French.
Read it in French, yes.
I have some new material
Hear it
actually.
in French.
If you're interested,
Yeah.
because I'm in September I'm supposed to do many readings, so I'd like to.
So you can practice.
But outside commissions, how do you feel about commissions, regardless of the financial reward?
Well, commissions to produce films is something that I never had. When I spoke of commission, it concerned the musician in that case. Or if you call that commission, but it's not a commission, when you're invited to do a performance somewhere, maybe they say, okay, we finance 3 days of rehearsal. But that's about everything I ever had as a commission. I have never read production of anything. Except, maybe once when I had my first exhibition in a place which was large, for me at least, a large exhibition with, 13 or 15 different pieces. I suggested that I could do a new original piece for the exhibition. They commissioned it so far as they gave me material and shelter for a few days, but it's not real money, usually, or very little money. But it's okay, because I tried to produce a film once, and it worked. And when everything was ready, I said I wouldn't do it. I was afraid, because it started to be too complicated. I don't like to film very much, I must confess. I do it sometimes, but I'm not really my element. But to have to say what to do to other people and direct a little team is a nightmare for me. I don't have the chief's commanding mentality. So I don't want to have collaborators who ask me what to do. So at the end, when the production was complete, I renounced it. So it's okay. What is nice is that when you self-produce something, you do it just as you can, and then you get paid. That's the idea. And it happens. It happens a few times for exhibitions or whatever. Or even art places, they buy copies sometimes, which is great. But they really don't have to. just need to press the download key. But sometimes they buy video, and that's good. That's like post-production, so to speak, retroactive production. So the advantage with that is that it's translated in English.
Yes, it's in English.
So as you want, I can read some of these in English. I wouldn't read the French because I don't know it by heart. I'm at it. Or I can also read small pieces that are not translated and much more recent.
I'd like to hear your French. I
This-
don't know if
this-
anyone else will.
This dates actually from 15 years ago, I guess. And the most recent things I have here are not long, but still a little, probably too long for me to improvise a translation.
No, just read it.
Don't translate.
Don't translate at all?
No.
Don't translate at all? Okay. Yes, there are two recent poems that I will present with images as well, but the images are less necessary here because what I've been doing actually recently after doing film editing mostly during 10 years and 5 years ago is drawing. It's more graphic images. So I draw the images myself, but I don't use them in animation. I just use them in illustration in the book, basically. Sometimes within the text. Sometimes I will try to do, I haven't done it yet, but to do readings with just the drawings, like a diaporama together. And so there are 2 or 3 completed pieces of this kind of drawings. I won't show the drawings, it doesn't matter really, but I just have to find this.
Are the drawings literal?
What do you mean?
I mean, are they abstract? Or?
No. They're very childish, childlike, simple drawings. Awkward. Quick, yeah. So I don't seem to find the one I wanted to. If you give me 30 seconds, maybe I'll find it here. Okay. So this is a poem, not very long, actually commenting on the graffiti, but maybe I can show it to you, at least in a small version. So the graffiti is something that I've seen, and it's famous, I guess, and many people have seen it. It's an ancient graffiti on a villa near Pompeii. It's not in Pompeii, it's in another little town where they discovered more recently a very large villa, a Roman villa, which belonged, I have to tell maybe a little of the story, although it's involved in the day, but it's a very large imperial villa called the Villa Oplantis, and it's very close to Naples, and this villa belonged to Poppaea, who was the wife of Nero. So Nero was not a very kind character to her, but his wife was maybe even worse. So that she persecuted the Catholic, the Christians in particular, and and they all died in the tried to flee, but they all died in the Vesuvius eruption. And the graffiti is in Greek. And it says, literally, remember Derrios. Berylos, you should say. Berylos being a proper name. So it says, remember Berylos. And so people have investigated on this Berylos, who could it be? And they discovered that Berylos was the name of one of Poppaea's slaves, and that he was one of these very learned slaves that they brought from Greece to be preceptors for their children. So he was a well-learned Greek man and a Christian also. And so probably he had some resentment towards Poppaea, who had Christian, eaten by wolves, lions. But it's just a hypothetical explanation. No one really knows what the graffiti means, or who wrote it, or who it was addressed to. Because remember, Berylos, it can be a signature, it can be, Berylos can be the object of the verb. You see, there are many ways of reading that. And that's exactly what it brings about. But it could be addressed to Poppaea as a threat, or as, remember your crimes against the Christian. So the graffiti. I'm not very agile with this. I will probably not read it well at all because I've never read it before.
First performance.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other image, but it's not important here, is a little origami volcano. Looks more or less like a volcano. Rappelle-toi Berylos. Rappelle-toi Berylos. Début des années 80, Torre Annunziata, plus dense population d'Europe, les fertiles contreforts du Vésuve, sa poudrière, la haine de la poésie, des ruines. L'adresse impérative d'un graffiti t'a épinglé, gravé à la hâte la nuit du 24 août 79, sur le mur d'une villa à bonne distance de Pompéi, dont les squatteurs chassaient les parvenus, fumaient au barbecue leurs fresques kitsch. Rappelle-toi Berylos, ce vieux grec au service de l'épouse de Néron, Poppée la dévoreuse de chrétiens, précepteur, chrétien lui-même. Lui aurait-il jeté un sort, glissé une défiction sous les pas? Rappelle-toi, Domina. Quoi donc? Ce que tu sais, que tu as fait, signé Berylos, un ami qui ne te veut plus rien. Ou bien, songe en mourant carbonisé, maîtresse, à ton esclave, moi, visage de ceux que tu fis torturer. Médite un brin tandis que l'enfer dégobille la morale de la fable. Rappelle-toi, Berylos atteint son but. Je le rappelle, on le connaît, pas sa destination. Ce fut peut-être une inconnue qui écrivit in extremis à Berylos de se rappeler quelque chose. Promesse non tenue, pomme S. Chez nous, tous les messages dépassent leur cible. Alors, bonheur, secret, vilainie, disons comme un commentateur fair-play, furieux, son vice inassouvi, cela ne nous regarde pas. Nous fixe en 2 mots, 2 dessins, le nom exigeant mémoire, échec de la connexion, mes touches enfoncées, mat, pique au vif. So maybe I should have one or two details like défiction. You know what défictions are? They're let's say, charms, but negative charms. Omen, malediction. And the Greeks had this wonderful habit of writing malediction on little pieces, long pieces of paper, and they would roll them, and they would hide them under the ground where the person they wanted to hurt was passing.
Little
every day.
curses.
Yeah, curses. Terrible curses. In a magazine I was editing years ago, we published the mythology of these, translated by some specialists, and they're very impressive. You even get scared because they're so precise. They say, your hands, your eyes, this disease, that you burn, that you do that. And they're rolled and put like under the, at the entrance of the house or on familiar places. So that was referred